The Houston Texans have plenty of things that they need to focus on in the offseason, but prioritizing those things and putting them in just the right spot, that's what we're going to do tonight on the channel. Plus, we're going to roast a mock draft, the inaugural roasting of a mock draft. We'll do that as well. Welcome to the channel. I'm Cody Stoots. Let's talk some Texans. Let's talk about what the Texans have to go out there and get this offseason, about their roster, where they are, and some of the things that they desperately need as they head into the offseason. I picked 7 things. It's not quite one position 7 times. I think 7 things the Texans got to focus on. Then want to put them in different categories, put them into different spots here for the Texans. I guess tiers is probably the best way to explore that. And so let's get right into that, and then we'll answer some questions, roast a mock draft, talk about a former Texans coach headed elsewhere. This is where I'm putting the categories together. Can use this, meaning, hey, think about it, put a little emphasis on it, make sure you can find one of these things before the offseason is over. Pretty good emphasis, which is, hey, you need to really think about putting some of these onto the roster. And then non-negotiables, these things have to be on the roster when they get ready for OTAs and minicamp. The non-negotiables from this offseason. Let's start with cornerback 3. Cornerback 3 is something that this team can absolutely use. We know that Derek Stingley and Kamari Lassiter got that thing taken care of on the outside. Lassiter drafted, many people thought he was going to be a slot cornerback. He ultimately ends up as an outside corner and starts as the outside corner basically from day 2 of his time with the Houston Texans and never looks back. The Texans were able to move Jalen Petrie down from safety to that nickel cornerback spot where he played most of the season. But when Kamari Lassiter wasn't on the field, and Stingley was super healthy this year, healthier than he's been any of his previous NFL years, but when Kamari Lassiter wasn't available, or the rare time that Derek Stingley needed a little bit of a breather, the Texans had to put Jeff Okudah on the field, and that was not good. And then when they couldn't put Jeff Okudah on the field, even though he was healthy, they put Miles Bryant on the field. It was okay. D'Angelo Ross, you remember that against Green Bay when he allowed a perfect passer rating when they targeted him. They desperately need to find somebody that can lock down and solidify that cornerback 3 spot. Now, that's not a huge, heavy, big investment. Okay, Jeff Okudah, a few $1 million they threw at him to try to get that thing going. CJ Henderson is certainly a guy that they thought about as for that position as well. He didn't make it through training camp. This is not some first or second or third round draft pick. This is not some huge, massive free agent investment, but they need somebody behind Kamari Lassiter, Derek Stingley, should that person be pressed into action as the outside backup cornerback. They need to just think about that. You can't live with the Jeff Okudahs of the world being your primary backup at a very important position like cornerback. Another thing that they could use, tight end help. I know that Brevin Jordan is back, and I know Dalton Schultz has a contract that makes it nearly impossible to move on from him, and Cade Stover will be coming back, and I'm excited to see what Cade Stover can do in his second season after a real offseason, getting ready for football, putting together what his NFL body is ultimately going to look like. I am excited to see that. But ultimately, you're going to need a little bit more from the tight end position. Now, maybe that's a tight end that can also play fullback. Maybe that's someone who's just a more pure version, a pure receiver, pure blocker, but they could use another tight end. And I know that a lot of us were excited for Brevin Jordan heading into 2024. D'Amico Ryan said he was constantly showing Brevin Jordan clips in meetings to get people pumped up, showing you how it should be done. Then Brevin Jordan went down with the knee injury. We have no idea what Brevin Jordan is going to be as a tight end. We have no idea if he's going to be able to bounce back from that knee injury. So having somebody else in there that has either a replicating skill set of what Jordan brings, or preferably a totally different skill set than what Jordan and Stover and Schultz brings, that would be a really nice investment. Again, can use this. Don't have to have it, but can use this is the way that I would phrase it. So those are the two things: backup cornerback and really a backup tight end as well. Going to put those in the can use this category. Now we're moving up to pretty good emphasis. As you go through the offseason, if you're Nick Caserio, you need to put a pretty good emphasis on this. Let's start with wideout depth. Wideout depth. Look, they had wideout depth last year. We thought coming into training camp they were going to be one of the best wide receiver rooms in all of football. Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, Noah Brown, Xavier Hutchinson in his second season, John Mechie finally getting an opportunity, Steven Sims as a guy that had some production late in the year as a special teamer. Maybe he could push on the wide receiver position. There was a lot to like about the wide receiver room, and then it didn't ever really click totally. And then Stephon Diggs got hurt, and then Tank Dell got hurt, and then Xavier Hutchinson wasn't any good, and John Mechie wasn't any good, and Robert Woods was still on the team, and he, could block well, but that's not really what you want out of your number 4 wide receiver. So wide receiver depth is definitely on the list, and you've got to get guys that can push for that 5 and 6 spot. You've got to find guys that could, on any given week, step up and be your 3rd best pass catcher, be your 4th best pass catcher if the tight ends can't be a factor that day. You've got to have more options, and it would be nice if you could just say, oh, well, Diggs was really good, re-sign him, and then you got Tank Dell, but Diggs is coming off a major knee injury. No idea if the Texans are going to re-sign him. And then Tank Dell, obviously, his 2025 is in question. Even if he does play in 2025, it's a lot later rather than sooner. So you got to go out and find those guys, and then find guys that can push Xavier Hutchinson, John Mechie. And if they go to training camp and they beat those guys out, so be it. So be it. That means that they're a little bit deeper into their NFL career. They've been around the block a little bit more, and maybe there's a little bit less learning curve for them for the new offense that they're all going to run with new offensive coordinator Nick Caley. But wide receiver depth, pretty good emphasis on adding some wide receiver depth here in the offseason. Running back 2. I would like to have somebody that is the clear-cut, unquestioned, no doubt running back 2, and somebody that I feel good about in that running back 2 spot. Somebody that is a 1-for-1 fill-in when he gets the opportunity for Joe Mixon. I know that player's not going to be Joe Mixon right away, but he's got to be able to produce something close to what Joe Mixon does. Dameon Pierce did not do that. Pierce also has a significant injury history. He didn't get to take over as running back 2 when Joe Mixon was hurt early in the season because Dameon Pierce was hurt. He ended his rookie season with an injury. He got hurt his second season, didn't fit into the offense. Now, new offense, new offensive coordinator, a little bit of a clean slate there for Dameon Pierce. But much like Xavier Hutchinson, John Mechie, and really much like a lot of positions on offense, guys need to be there to push Dameon Pierce and make it difficult for Dameon Pierce to capture that running back 2 spot. And if that guy can't push Dameon Pierce right away, then he needs to have a very clear role as running back 3. I know that the Texans have a couple of other running backs hanging around the roster, but this is one of the deepest running back classes in recent memory. There are actually 3 different guys that draft people believe could have been the number 1 running back on any given year. Ashton Jeanty from Boise State, but Caleb Johnson from Iowa is a guy that people love, and Omarion Hampton from North Carolina is a guy that people love. Any of those guys could have been number 1s on any given year at the running back spot. Hampton's 2 and Johnson's 3 for most people because Jeanty's so dang good. But that's just to demonstrate that guys that go on day 3 in this year's draft probably would have gone early on day 2 in last year's draft. So it's the year to be snagging you a running back and having somebody ready in case Dameon Pierce doesn't look good in the new offense. Or having somebody ready that can be that solid running back 3 for you, even if Dameon Pierce does look good. Moving on to another position that needs pretty good emphasis. Defensive tackle. The only defensive tackles the Texans have signed to the roster right now, Tim Settle and Tommy Togiai. So you need a few more You need a few more defensive tackles. You've got a couple of guys that are free agents in Mario Edwards Jr. and Foley Fatukasi. Both of those guys are free agents. Kurt Heinisch is set to be a free agent as well. I know they added a guy to the futures roster, or signed a guy with a future contract, Jaden Peavy, who's played a little bit in the NFL, but that's not a guy that would keep you from doing something. You got to go out there and find D'Amico Ryans, a couple of just maulers there in the middle. Settle played pretty darn well, and Togiai ended up getting a lot of snaps and getting those snaps actually over Kurt Heinisch, who's also a free agent. And you got to go add to those guys. I'd be in favor of Edwards and or Fatukasi being back, but don't want that to be it from a defensive tackle standpoint. And I saw this little draft nugget from, I believe it was Daniel Jeremiah today. And if it wasn't him, it was Dane Brugler, and I'm going to find it. But this is a loaded defensive tackle class. Daniel Jeremiah, NFL Network, NFL.com's top draft guy. Last year at this time, I had potential starter grades on 12 defensive tackles. This year, I have 24 of them. He had potential starter grades on twice as many defensive tackles as what was available last year. So, defensive tackle, pretty good spot. Panda, I see that comment. We're going to come back to that. Defensive tackle, pretty darn good spot to be drafting. There's always a guy that I would trust D'Amico Ryans to go out there and grab in free agency and turn into a nice player. So you got to go just find some bodies and maybe even put some emphasis in finding a little bit higher ceiling for some of those defensive tackles. Now, the non-negotiables, if you've watched the channel, you got to have a pretty good idea of where the non-negotiables are going. The first one, wide receiver 2. You've got to have somebody that can be Nico Collins' running mate. You saw it in the Super Bowl. A.J. Brown had Devontae Smith, and the Chiefs, well, they had Xavier Worthy, but they didn't have somebody with Xavier Worthy. So you got to have a running mate for Nico Collins. Maybe it's a veteran off of another team like a Cooper Kupp or a Deebo Samuel. Maybe it's a draft pick at 25 overall like Luther Burden from Missouri or a Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State. But you've got to find a running mate for Nico Collins. That has to be a big-time emphasis. And really, by the time you finish the offseason, you get into the offseason program of mini camps and OTAs and all of those fun things, you've got to be able to say, that's the guy opposite Nico Collins. That's the guy that other teams have to focus on. Wide receiver 2, very, very important this offseason for the Houston Texans. And the other one, you got to know this one's coming. Interior O-line help. I don't care if it's a left guard. I don't care if it's a right guard. I don't care if it's a center. Go and find interior offensive line help. They could use guys on the 2 deep. They could use guys that could maybe come in and start right away. If you want to make an investment in a rookie, I prefer a free agent. Interior offensive line help. Okay? They've got to get better on the offensive line just to demonstrate how bad they were on the offensive line. The pressure rate that Patrick Mahomes dealt with in the Super Bowl was similar to the pressure rate that C.J. Stroud dealt with in the totality of the Texans season. Mahomes had 16 pressures in the Super Bowl. C.J. Stroud dealt with, on average, 14 pressures a game. And 10 games were actually higher than the Texans' season-long grade. So 37.9% of their passing snaps, they allowed a quarterback pressure. At 10 games, that was actually higher than 37.9%. That's how bad the offensive line was. It was putrid. It was awful. They've got to get better. Nick Caley's going to help with that. The new offense is going to help with that. Guys have to play better. Guys are going to have a little bit more experience. Hopefully they'll improve. They're hopefully going to bring in a multitude of options, but the interior offensive line has to be better. And they have to do that by getting some new faces in some new places on that interior offensive line. So we started with cornerback 3, and tight end is something the Texans can use this offseason. Wideout depth, running back 2, and defensive tackle put a pretty good emphasis on it. And the non-negotiables, you got to know this is settled by minicamp, OTAs, wide receiver 2, interior offensive line help. What say you? Let's get into the questions, comments, joys, and concerns from this, including comment from I Must Pandaling, a frequent contributor to the chat here in the live streams and in the comment section of the recorded videos. Sounds like every position is loaded then, huh? LOL. Well, not quite. I would tell you wide receiver is not loaded. There's some good wide receivers, and wide receiver is a deeper position than it previously has been, but I don't believe that it has a very strong wide receiver class like it did last year when I was pounding the table hoping the Texans went out there and drafted a wide receiver. There were guys in the first round that were awesome. There were guys in the second round that were awesome. And there are guys, I'll put it in your bonnet, okay? Or put it in your hat. Whatever head covering you wear. Roman Wilson in Pittsburgh, that's a late round flyer that you're going to want to take in your fantasy drafts come July, August, September, okay? Roman Wilson was awesome last year. He was hurt most of last year. Really good wide receiver. So wide receiver is not deep. Quarterback stinks this year. Not a lot of depth at the quarterback spot. It doesn't feel like defensive end is loaded, though there are some edge rushers in this class. Cornerback is nowhere near as deep as it was last year. And linebacker and safety, your guess is as good as mine. I haven't dug into those things just quite yet. So not every position's loaded. Okay, but running back, Texans need a running back too, loaded. Defensive tackle, Texans need some defensive tackles, loaded. Okay, loaded up at those positions. A couple of your comments and questions. Jose Garcia says, run that ticket in if Nolan is there at 25. Now, Nolan is Walter Nolan, the defensive tackle from Ole Miss. He was incredible at the Senior Bowl. He was nasty over the course of the season in the SEC. I made the comment to somebody while I was at the Senior Bowl as all 3 of those Ole Miss defensive linemen had incredible success. I made the comment, how did Ole Miss lose any games? Then I remembered, well, they played in the SEC. So it's pretty tough, and everybody's got guys like that. But Walter Nolan was really, really good. I tell you, D'Amico Ryans probably have a hard time saying no to Walter Nolan at 25, as Jalen Johnson asks about him as well. Bubba Homeschool says, Besh, that's Jack Besh, the TCU wide receiver, is the perfect wide receiver 2 for us. Physical, blocks, dynamic, RAC. Look, Besh is a fun watch. He likes to claim there's no 50-50 balls when you throw it up to him. He's much better. So Besh, a very solid option for wide receiver 2. You maybe want someone with a little bit more separation ability and maybe a different skill set than kind of what Nico Collins has. It's a little replicating from what Nico Collins brings, but it's a solid investment here. Jacob Nyblack says interior O-line and D-line are non-negotiable. Wide receiver 2 a close second since both Tank and Diggs are likely gone. Yeah. Look, D-line help, you're going to have to just add bodies, but I don't know that you need to go out and make one of these defensive tackles coming up, a super expensive defensive tackle. I don't know that you have to use 25 overall on a defensive tackle. So it kind of checked in at pretty good emphasis and not necessarily a non-negotiable for me. They do not have a pass catcher they trust after Nico Collins on this roster right now. They really don't. You don't trust Dalton Schultz. You don't trust Xavier Hutchinson. You don't trust John Mechie, not to that level, not to be the number 2 pass catcher for this team. So that is a huge, huge emphasis. Stoots, would swing tackle be a need as well? Yeah, you'd probably need a swing tackle because Blake Fisher in a perfect world is your right tackle. And I guess in a perfect world, Titus Howard is the starting left guard for this team. But you wouldn't necessarily make a super emphasis on this. There's tackles that kind of hang around that are swing worthy that you could maybe invest in a little bit later on. Thoughts on Jalen Royals, the Utah State wide receiver in the second round? Maybe a little high for Jalen Royals. Probably could find a better player than him at what the Texans currently have, which is 58. So we know for sure the Texans have 25, 58, and 89. After that, it changes because there's going to be comp picks added and things like that. But we know for sure they've got 25, 58, 89 right now. I say right now because you never know what exactly the general manager is up to from a trade standpoint. This is funny. Sean G says the Texans draft should be misspelled laughing out loud. Look, I think there's definitely an idea about adding young guys to the equation. I'd like a guy that's played a little bit of football to step in there and help out too. I'd like a guy to step in there and play a little football that, somebody's been around the block, blocked a little bit, had some success, somebody like that. Steven asks, what about Hopkins? I'm assuming you mean bringing back DeAndre Hopkins. I'm not a huge fan of the idea. I don't know that there's a lot left in DeAndre Hopkins. So I'm not the biggest fan of that. Riffic says safety position is deep as well. Can't rely on Ward or Petrie. Well, Jimmy Ward, from the injury standpoint, that's certainly a question. You're going to have to find somebody that can play if he gets hurt. And he's had significant injury problems the past couple of seasons. And then Petrie, I felt like Petrie played really well at his nickel cornerback spot, for as best as you could expect. And that was maybe not even having an offseason emphasis in that. Maybe he knows he's playing that. He could be even a little bit better. So I'm not super ready to just kind of give up on Jalen Petrie. Kevin Zopa, sorry if I messed that up. Zopa, it might just be Zopa. Kevin Zopa, would you sign Christian Harris to an extension? Nightstream, exclamation point. I would not. I would not sign Christian Harris to an extension. I would make Christian Harris play out 2025 and then see where it goes. Remember, you have Henry To'o on this roster as well. Plus, you could add some late guys or maybe some undrafted free agents, some veterans. It's a position where I feel like DeMeco Ryans could find some guys. Dominique Twyman says, why not get the best available linebacker so back up to agent zero? Look, I feel like at 25, you really need a guy that's going to play right away. A guy that can help you right away. Step in at wide receiver. Step in at defensive tackle. If he's a guard, step in at guard day one. It's tough. It's tough to draft a guy at 25 and then not play him right away. And I don't want to plan for life after Azeez Al-Shire just yet. Gage asks, are we doing a mock draft tonight, Cody? We're not doing a mock draft. We're going to roast a mock draft, though. We're going to go through someone's mock draft, and we're going to roast it. All right? And it pains me because, well, I like the guy, but we're going to roast it anyway. Thoughts on later round running backs, Damian Martinez from Miami or Jaden Blue from Texas? I got to tell you, I don't believe Jaden Blue is going to stay a late round running back. I believe Jaden Blue is going to go on day 2. He's going to run really fast at the combine. People are going to look at some of the success he had at Texas, and they're going to point to it and say, we want that in the NFL. They didn't use him right. I believe Jaden Blue is going to jump up into a second round, third round, I guess early fourth round situation. All right, couple more. Thoughts on bringing back Justin Reed? Feels like it'd be a little pricey, but I'd be intrigued. The tough part is Jimmy Ward, with his contract extension that he got last year, he's kind of the assumed starter for this team. So is he going to be the starter? Does he have a clear-cut backup? Is he going to be a backup? I can't imagine Jimmy Ward wants to sign up for that. Is Jimmy Ward going to make it through training camp and make this team? That's another question as well. So that's one to pay attention to. If you signed Reed, it would give you a pretty good indication about what Jimmy Ward's future is, which is not good. Not good. Okay, let's talk about one of the news items that popped up today. Bobby Slowick lands in Miami. The Texans' former offensive coordinator is headed over to the Miami Dolphins. He is going to be their pass game coordinator, their senior passing game coordinator. Slowick and Mike McDaniel are quite close. Seen them hanging out a bunch at the NFL Scouting Combine last year, which, by the way, in less than 2 weeks, myself, Landry Locker from the Locker Room, will be live at the NFL Scouting Combine in Indianapolis Monday through Friday. I'll have a ton of stuff for you. You don't want to miss out on any of that. So be ready for that in less than 2 weeks. So the NFL Scouting Combine coming your way. We see McDaniel and Slowick hanging out in the NFL Scouting Combine last year. So it doesn't surprise me. They, of course, worked together in 2 different spots, I believe. There was overlap in Washington. And then they obviously worked together in San Francisco. Double check me on the Washington one, though. But good for Bobby Slowick. He didn't stay unemployed long. Is there a chance that Bobby Slowick learns a tremendous amount from his failure? Certainly. While we talk about Bobby Slowick, the old offensive coordinator, the new offensive coordinator will be introduced on Thursday. D'Amico Ryans and Nick Caley talking Thursday, 1 p.m. Obviously, we'll have extensive breakdown for you of Nick Caley's press conference on the SNL channel, which if you haven't subscribe to that. You don't want to miss out on the daily live show with myself and Landry Locker from the Locker Room. And, of course, I'll have a big breakdown of Nick Caley's press conference here. We will roast a mock draft here in just a moment. Get to a couple of more of your questions, comments, joys, and concerns here in the comment section. Robert says, trade for Cooper Kupp from the Rams, then go wide receiver at 25, and you're set for a starting 3 in 2025. Certainly, and unless Cooper Kupp gets hurt and the rookie takes a little bit of time to get ready, but I don't trade for a guy thinking he's going to get hurt. That's not why you did the Diggs trade. I don't draft a guy at 25 thinking he's going to have a hard time figuring it out. The guy who was drafted around 25 last year, 23rd last year? Brian Thomas Jr. is one of the best wide receivers in football last year. So you're not going to get that guy. But if you get a really good player at 25 and Kupp is there to help you, you got an outside guy, you got Kupp in the slot, Nico Collins, you can make things work. Okay? You can make things work. What round do we find a linebacker that can cover? Put a pin in that one, Edwin. I don't know the answer to it yet. I haven't looked at linebackers. I haven't seen anybody really talk about linebackers. I do feel like the first pick of day 3, so round 4, round 5, the name that I would think about is Jack Kaiser, the Notre Dame linebacker. He looked really good at the Senior Bowl in some of the coverage drills. So Jack Kaiser from Notre Dame. Put that name in the back of your brain, and then ask this question a month from now. And I'll have a better answer for you. Go get DK Metcalf and draft wide receiver at 25. Woo! Woo, okay, all right. So DK Metcalf, that probably costs you the 58th overall pick, and it probably costs you a lot of your financial flexibility. And you get a wide receiver at 25. I don't know that you would go wide receiver at 25 because Metcalf's going to be an outside guy, and there's not an inside wide receiver that you would draft at 25. I just feel like it's too expensive, not only from a draft pick commitment, but also from a financial commitment because DK Metcalf's at the end of his contract, and he's going to want a new deal, and that's going to be expensive. So then you'd have DK Metcalf and Derek Stingley and Nico Collins and Joe Mixon and CJ Stroud and Will Anderson, and everybody starts to come up at the same time, and you're kind of running out of money, you know? You run out of money pretty quick. I as much as I like the DK Metcalf idea, and I wish they could make it work, I just don't see exactly how they make it work. Just don't see it. Do we have a deadline to re-sign Diggs, or else we take a lot of dead cap? Yeah, that's Monday, actually. Monday. So Monday is certainly one of those days to watch from a Stephon Diggs standpoint. I got to imagine they're probably not ready to make a decision on Stephon Diggs, so they'll just eat the dead cap and call it a day. If we have any chance of getting T. Higgins, then why is Joe Mixon? If we have no chance, of getting T. Higgins, then why is Joe Mixon recruiting him? You know, Never say never. I would say never say never. That's what I would say about that. Like, can you make the money work? Is it a good use of your assets? Probably not. Do you turn into a really good 1-2 wide receiver punch? Absolutely. I would say this though. T. Higgins sure misses a lot of games, man. T. Higgins surely misses a lot of games. Amari Cooper, very okay. Very okay. I don't know that he's going to sign in the first wave of free agency. I'd be shocked by that. Just very okay. Hernan A., how confident are you in our O-line next season after watching the Super Bowl? It's obviously need a good O-line to win it all. I mean, I was probably more confident than most going into last year, and that confidence was not rewarded. So I'm going to be pretty pessimistic on this offensive line until they show me something. I got to imagine at least 3 repeat names, probably 4 repeat names. There may only be one new guy on this offensive line. So my confidence level is middling. If they could just end up as an average offensive line, it would go a very, very long way to being a super successful team. I feel like they'll be running out of money signing Sting, Anderson, and CJ. Why not just go all in now? Not like Dallas. I mean, look, they may very well do that. Like, Danielle Hunter's going to come off the books at the end of this year. See what happens with him. Danico Autry can come off the books at the end of this year. Can move on from Dalton Schultz. It's not as tenuous as I made it seem, but you do need to kind of be thinking for the future while also trying to maximize the present. Would love Mekhi Becton, but I don't envision him leaving the Eagles. Look, Mekhi Becton would be playing. He's playing right now with the Eagles. He's playing right guard next to probably the best right tackle in football, or the second best right tackle in football, behind Penei Sewell and Lane Johnson. And at center, they got a really good center. That's not the case here. So I don't know that Mekhi Becton kind of fits. Mekhi Becton feels like a guy that's only successful on the Philadelphia Eagles. That's what I would say. Do you think we can get Garrett Wilson? No, I don't believe the new GM wants to do that. And it probably costs you 2 first-round picks and a new contract, so I don't know. What would you prioritize at 25 right now? Wide receiver, O-line. I'd go wide receiver from that standpoint because I hope they add a veteran offensive lineman. All right. Let's roast a mock draft. Okay? Let's roast a mock draft. Now, I like Chad Ryder. He does a really good job over at NFL.com talking about the draft. He's one of the only guys that starts off from the jump giving you 3-round mock drafts. I like Chad a lot. I like his mock drafts a lot. But we got to roast this one, okay? Tennessee Titans, Cam Ward, be my guest. I feel like he's probably the best quarterback in this class. It makes sense. Travis Hunter to the Browns. Shadur Sanders. I'm scrolling here. Like, oh, Will Johnson to the Jaguars? Okay, pretty good cornerback. Don't necessarily want to see him in Jacksonville. Rather see him there than Tet McMillan. Where does he have Tet McMillan going? Okay, there's Walter Nolan. Oh, freak, going 8th. We're talking about maybe getting him at 25. I don't see it. Tyler Warren to the Saints. Man, that'd be cool for them. Kind of wish the Texans could get Tyler Warren, the Penn State tight end. That's not going to happen. Chicago Bears, Will Campbell. Really good offensive tackle. They need some offensive tackle help. The 49ers need a tackle of the future with Trent Williams getting a little bit older. Tet McMillan going to the Cowboys. Man, CeeDee Lamb, Tet McMillan, that's great. What the hell's going on here? The Houston Texans are on the clock at 13. What are you doing, Chad Ryder? What are you doing? And then they trade up for Jalen Walker, who is a linebacker. And I know linebacker kind of feels dirty. He's more of like an edge / linebacker, but he hadn't been a starter until this year. Even this year, it wasn't super regular from his dominance. And the projected trade is the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd round picks for this pick and a 4th rounder. That's not a good use of assets. That's not a good way to spend your draft picks, moving up from 25 to 13 for a linebacker that even if you thought he was an excellent edge rusher, you're set with your starters at edge rusher. You know Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter in 2025 are going to be the edge rushers. Jalen Walker? Come on, Chad. Now let's go take a look at who's available at 25 that would make a much better selection. He picks a linebacker at 25 for the Dolphins. Well, if they wanted a linebacker, wouldn't they take a linebacker at 13? But okay. But he says Luther Burden or Emeka Egbuka would be available. I mean, either one of those guys would be excellent selections. So would my guy Jonah Savanaia from Arizona. He'd be a good selection. Oh, look, there's edge rushers available at the back part of the first round. But I just don't love that from Chad Ryder, and he'll have a couple of more third-round mock drafts, but that's a bad, bad draft pick. Moving up from 25 all the way up there, sending your first, second, and third-round pick for a linebacker who only became a starter this year, and I get the Texans love these SEC guys. They love SEC edge rushers and guys from Georgia. But come on, what are we doing, Chad Ryder? What in the world is that? So that is mock draft roasting. Put that on a scale of, let's see, bad draft picks. The Okoye wearing scale? No. It's pretty bad. It's not quite some of the weird stuff that we saw in the past couple of years when the Texans had multiple picks and like, oh, move up, do this. Blah, 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 blah. Like, it's not quite that weird, but it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. And the Texans only have 6 draft picks. They've got a first, second, third, fourth, the Bills' 5th, and a 7th. So you can't be trading your first, second, and third for a linebacker that's not guaranteed to start. That's just not good football right there. So I like Chad Ryder. We will talk about Chad Ryder's 3-round mock draft later on. But right now, Chad Ryder, he's getting roasted from the mock draft standpoint. So roasted the mock draft. I probably was a little nicer than I could have been. But we will do roast my mock draft at a later date. I will ask people to send me your mock drafts after I've got a little bit more information on some of these players, and we'll do roast your mock draft, and we'll just talk about why this is a good draft, bad draft, and then maybe the people that have the really good ones will send you something from the SNL catalog. So got SNL stuff coming. Got new Houston football stuff coming. Some fun Houston football stuff on the way. Okay. That will do it for the stream tonight. Nick Caley talks on Thursday, 1 p.m. So you don't want to miss out on SNL at 4 p.m. each and every day, but certainly not on Thursday. Don't miss out on SNL Thursday at 4 p.m. And don't miss the locker room at 10 o'clock tonight. 10 o'clock tonight, the locker room. Landry Locker will have plenty for you on the locker room. And I'm going back to the design cave and start designing some more stuff, adjusting some things, getting some Houston football stuff together, some SNL stuff together, getting ready for the combine, lots of fun stuff. Appreciate everybody for watching the video tonight. We end the live streams the same way each and every time. It's my hope for you. It's my charge for you as well. I want you to eat good. I want you to sleep good. I want you to be good. We'll talk Texans again soon. Thanks for watching, everybody.